that's now fundamentally able to execute and create and use it and even support it, right? So that's fundamentally changed the model, and we'll see how that actually evolves over the next couple of years, like how open source actually really begins to get effect about that. That's probably another topic right there, right? Open source, the support model has changed because now AI is beginning to come in there. It's using projects to go create its things. It's lowering the cost of or barriers to entry. And on top of that, it's also going in there and actually making changes to the open source projects. And some of the open source people who maintain the open source projects are now beginning to get frustrated because they now have to they used to have to curate only a couple PRs, and now they're having to go inside and they get a whole bunch of these new ones being auto-opened by AI tools. But this is really our shift, right? So kind of cool, really amazing like how this is beginning to change. I'll slow down, see if you have any questions, reactions, anything. All right. So let's talk about really what is going on right here, right? Where we're having the power flip. Within the last 2-3 years, since we brought around generative AI, not only did we make it easier to code it, vibe code it, not only did we lower the barrier to entry to creating these new products, we've also flipped where the power in the relationship actually goes, right? Before, it used to be you had product and you had product managers working to define what the product was, and still the technical team still owned the power within it, right? There are examples, and I'm gonna have to remember what the products are. If you go back and there's a really great book around Google's methods of like how they build code, and there's many, many stories inside there where the product managers wanted to name the product one thing, and the engineers just said no, and would just name it something else because they fundamentally had the power of how it was all gonna work. But we're now beginning to see the flip, right? So now that you can define what that product is, you're now more in control because you can now create that prototype in the weekend and put that in front of a technical team. And in many cases, get other people to go just as fast, okay? So the product manager is really beginning to get a lot more space here, right? A little bit more value in the value chain, a lot more, but this is actually good. To be honest, this is really good because the ability for us to change that model so that we now iterate extremely fast and see what people want, it's also flipped the way that we can also build and release products. Before, we used to take good guesses at how people would react to our product, and then we go put it out there, and then we'd gather their feedback, and then we change it, right? So what did design look like? You had design up front. You had people who were really gifted around how this UX is supposed to look, how the interaction is supposed to look, so they would go first and then define that for the team. Now we can take that and we put that at the end of the process because you can now take that iteration cycle, make that very fast, and actually now just go put that in front of users, see how they're actually using it, see what the value they're getting, and cull the product extremely fast, and then come back and actually refine the actual UX. So that's actually a really fun thing. So let's talk about the co-founder trap. This actually kind of originates a little bit from a conversation that me and Chris had, because we're going to kind of dig a little bit into what it means when you're actually beginning to build a company. So let's say I've inspired all of you. I'd like to believe that would be true. Tonight, you all are going to start a new rubber band fitness app, and you're all going to be a founder, okay? So, and then you also go get a co-founder, someone who can actually make sure to double check and do some of this additional work, okay? So, one of the most important things about founding a company, so first off, how many times do we see stories here about the single founder? You know, the Mark Zuckerbergs, right? Mark Zuckerberg had like a co-founder. We just don't hear about him too much because he got pushed out of the business extremely fast. Statistically, your chances of your company becoming a real thing go that go extremely high when you actually have co-founders. And investment actually looks for you to actually have a co-founder because it allows them to know that there's some sort of weight to the decision process. So, and when you do the co-founder, make sure you should. It's very common that people who start some of these companies will like just put out a little retail ad. Help me with I need this type of co-founder. Okay, so let's talk about what could happen, right? We're going to start a company. We need someone a little bit more inside the co-founding, maybe a little bit more technical to help us with this, maybe a little more product-oriented to help us with it. The key thing is your co-founders are extremely important, not only to the success of your company, but the success of you. So there are a couple of things that you can do because they often you will see some very strange behavior. So this is almost like I could now tell stories about this. One of the companies I started, when I brought the people in who are gifted and I worked with them all the time in another part of my life, all of a sudden it was large conversation about equity. Like the equity meant something at that point. So when you first start a C Corp and you start issuing this equity, basically they peg the value of of the total of your 10 million shares to about $10. So you'll literally have these conversations with people where they're like talking about equity and really treating it as value and really be obsessed about it. And you'll be like, dude, that's like, I can pay you the dollar, right? Because they're like thinking about the future too much when they should be thinking about now. How are they actually getting sweat into the actual company and actually turning that fraction of a cent into maybe a penny? If it's even worth a penny at that point, right? You have 10 million shares, you now have $10 million. So you will find that you can hire these people and they may just sit back waiting because they're not actually getting real cash. Because at this point of you building this company, you're actually building it with a dream. You're building it for a potential future, and you're doing it with a co-founder. So one of the things is there are ways for you to control this though. So you start this venture, you put what's called a 1-year cliff. So now you have a full year where you can work with this person who's really concerned about the future, and you can remind them that, actually don't remind them, that's a really bad idea, that if within the year, that's actually when they would get equity, when they could actually get a percentage of equity. And what that helps them get grounded in is that they are working for the here and now to build value. Because if they can build value now, you can actually make the choice to keep them around to actually meet their 1-year cliff. I myself, just in the last year, I brought in a co-founder. I brought in a person who's a co-founder. Person was like, I know everything about business, I know everything about sales. Yet, whenever I asked him like how sales are going, he wasn't doing anything. Then he'd tell me like, hey, we need another full-time person on this. I'm like, you're it, dude. And eventually had to exit the person. Just tell him, hey, by the way, you're not part of us anymore, because, I almost want to tell you these stories because it would be very cathartic, but it's like, by the way, number one thing, if you ever are trying to sell your product, first question you should ask is, how far are you looking at other products and how far are you in that cycle? Because if people have already decided on something and are just having a conversation with you just out of, hey, they met this guy and they like wanted to continue the conversation, you could end up wasting a lot of people's time. That's the story, by the way. There's more. So.
Can you elaborate a bit on how much clarity you had to have with that 1 year essentially probationary period? And did they feel like you fired them on the blue, or they realized that, hey, it's review time and I don't want to work with you anymore?
Yeah, let me think about that. Like the clarity, like how, like setting the expectations with the people.
Yeah,
Yeah, so like let's play out a scenario, right? Like you went in, you got a co-founder, right? And let's say that like I went and got this one co-founder as a sales guy. And like what actually happened when I got frustrated about no sales, I actually just picked up the phone. I found a way to contact people and actually get them to sign, right? So two sales later, and he's like celebrating the success, right, of us going. How did I exit him? Well, fundamentally, um, because you're one, you kind of have to. The thing is in your contract when you do like a 1 year cliff. The easiest way when you have to exit a person is you don't exit them with cause. With cause. Okay, so that's the trick. So like in this case, if you're saying, hey, let me sit down and have a conversation with you about performance, or having a conversation about what was going wrong, first off, that conversation could just get weird and it could get long and it could get messy. Secondly, they could say that you fired them with cause, and yet at will employment says fundamentally that if you let go a person, even the equity rules say if you let go a person without cause, you're good, right? So so now naturally put yourself in the position of being a co-founder, right? Like you're now working in this company and you have a 1 year cliff and the people could exit you at any time. So let's play that position, right? Defensively, right? Fundamentally, so most of the companies that are venturable, meaning that someone can come and invest, those are C corps, and they fundamentally are formed underneath Delaware law because, for some reason, even though there's 49 other states, it's just easier for venture capital to work with just one state structure. So you'll typically go and create your venture underneath Delaware, underneath the C corp. Now, when you do that, the most fundamental thing is you're going to go and you're going to set up what's called a shareholder agreement, okay? And the shareholder agreement is basically the rules by which you're playing, which basically say, hey, by the way, this is how we're going to play the game, right? If I get, for example, if there's 4 of us and there's percentage, this percentage means that we can vote a person off, right? But that's one of your first things that you're going to do is create your bylaws, which is basically your rules of how you engage. Typically, you do it by majority shareholder because most corporations work by majority shareholder. Even the largest corporations work by majority shareholder. They elect fundamentally the board of directors when they're big enough. Does that kind of help that out? So once you have those rules, like, now, the other half of that equation and really comes down to like you as a leader. So I just say like you as a leader should always fundamentally always deal with people that work with you, for you, or alongside you, like in this case, just transparently. Just tell them all the time. Hey, by the way, like in this case, he should have seen it coming because I literally said, so I have trouble with the very fact that we just took most of our company resources to meet with a person for an hour that was already signing a contract with another company, and you never even bothered to ask the question. More importantly, for the last 5 to 6 months, I handed you lists of people that were already wanting to get the product, and you did nothing. In fact, you left one of them, one opportunity, you purposely let cold. So like in this case, we had an opportunity to go with a provider that would open the doors for 450 customer referrals, just part of their contract system. The person, and I was like, it's served up. The guy's interested. He's ready. Just call him up and just work the deals. And 2 months later, I'm like, so are you ever going to call him? And then a month later, he decided that he's going to start writing him. The guy never responded. Like, of course, right? he at that point was like, these guys don't respond, they don't do anything. So just usually just be very upfront. I got a lot of slides. Hopefully I'm making it on time. How much more time? Okay. All right. Enterprise reality check. I'm coming back to our rubber band app that we're all doing together. That shall remain nameless. It's not him, by the way. just letting you know. So we went and we built the app, and we're like, it's awesome. It's ready for day one. So here's the thing. These are the conversations like I've literally had with the person in my neighborhood. Well, he's talking about the money he's making. He's not talking about the more important things, which is due diligence or the legality of it. The most fun thing about a venture is lawyers, because you have to deal with them. You have to make sure that the way that you form the organization is legal. You have to make sure the way your sales contracts are written are legal, pretty much. And on top of that, when we sell to enterprise, which is what this is really about, when we go sell to enterprise, sell to the enterprise, they always are going to have first the due diligence meeting, right? So in my case, I think I told you the one I'm working on right now is a fintech. So you can imagine, I go to talk to any financial institution, they're going to be like, did you build it securely? Does it meet these certifications? Are there other people using it? But that is just one aspect of it, what makes it hard. So it's not unusual, at least for me, but this is also the other thing. Know exactly what your acquisition cycle is, what your customer acquisition cycle is. In mine, it's 6 to 18 months. The rubber band app could be as quick as 10 minutes, okay? But again, he also skipped the legal part. So if the rubber band somehow breaks while someone's exercising and it snaps up in the person, they lose an eye, and he hasn't done any of the legal stuff, that could be a problem. Let's talk a little bit about the procurement wall. Okay, the procurement wall, this is really just kind of talking about the very fact, again, we're building an AI app. We're focused on trying to quit. Will it be an actual business? Well, let's do the math. The math of quitting. So we want to make some money. We want to make enough money so we can support our families, support our lifestyle, support something. So how are we selling, what product are we selling and how are we selling it, okay? So I'm going to theorize numbers here. They're not real numbers, so nobody will be injured. If I'm in my fintech, I say it's going to cost me $20,000 per month for someone to do it, that's the amount of money that I have to replace. By the way, I do not make $240,000, but I'd have a better t-shirt and everything. But this is fundamentally doing all the math to say, hey, by the way, if in order to make that replacement, like how much money do I actually have to make? Now, how many customers do I have to get? Can we actually go make it, right? Like in this case, $20 per month we have to replace in order to get to $240K per year. And then in order for us just to get that first phase one statement of work, it's going to be $25,000, right? And that statement of work is going to go over multiple months. And we can quickly see over here, I got a problem, because if I have 17 more months, I still have 16 more months of $20,000 to go put together, right? And actually, because we go over a year, even more than that. So the point here is thinking about creating a venture. You also have to think about, like, how are you gonna get paid? How are you gonna survive? Now, here's the thing about starting a startup. Typically, a venturable startup, the people who invest are not looking for you to be making $240,000. They're thinking more like cut that too, right? They're like 40,000. That's great. It's almost a little bit of a joke, which is like you quit your job to go work on your own thing, and then the investors are like your new boss, who really want you to work for nothing. You can negotiate with them, but So anyways, so why do founders earn 10 times more? So let's say that we take that $600 app and then we go, again, now my neighbor, we're walking. He's making his 600 people $5. He's got $3,000, right? $3,000 per month. That works, but then if he was to found that company, why would he make 10 times more? That's because that's the reason why he's going to get paid more is because when you start establishing out those struts, those legal, there's the other parts of the organization that you start creating, right? So you'll have marketing, promotion. You'll be like, well, why can't I do that? Well, just doing my $600 thing. Again, 600 users might fly underneath the IRS at this point. 1,200 users not, right? At a certain point, when you make a certain amount of money, the tax man does find you. So, and they will look like, how did you form that? How did you form your liabilities, right? And then this quickly gets into the legal part. Okay, so now that's what was it? 1,200. We got 1,200 users at 5,000. That's $6,000 per month, 72,000 per year. Quickly with that, I can tell you, as a fact, the lawyers have already eaten that up once that question came up because they had to go back and redo almost all of your documents. They had to backdate them. They had to make negotiations. But if you do everything right and you start becoming a founder, you get a superpower. It's called the corner rat superpower. Basically means I have no choice. Now, in order for me to replace that $20,000, I have no choice but to find a $25,000 statement of work. I am going to be extremely motivated in order for me to go do that. But the point is that this is actually where those startup stories come from, right? Where the innovation comes from. And this is why, like, when you start talking to you'll find, like, when you start working with larger companies, that they actually do like working with startups to try to get things solved because they find ways to get things done. I'm going to attribute it mostly to this because you get acquired and you get an exit. That same company magically somehow becomes 25 to 30 times slower. This is a real thing. Chris, this is a real thing?
I might compress it a little bit more, but yeah, it depends on your market.
Mm-hmm. So, fundamentally, you will find here that what happens is you have a great idea. Your first idea is usually a stinker. Your second idea is kind of less bad. Your third idea is a little less bad. Around your fourth time, you're beginning to get it to fit with what they're doing. So there's a book called The Mom Test. Okay, so I'll just tell you a little bit about this book. So in this book, it basically says what you will find very often is you will go off with your startup and you will talk to people. And a lot of people are very, very nice, and they will say very nice things to you. In the back of their minds, they're like, this chucklehead has no clue and is not telling the things there. So it's like as if you were to call your mom and tell her about your venture idea, what would she do? She'd be like, oh, that's wonderful, honey. I'm sure it's going to be amazing, and all these other things. The key thing that you have to begin to get as a thing is to pick up on those cues, that people are being polite. Because the moment you can get them to not be polite, they'll start telling you exactly what's going on. With my first fintech, I had a great idea. I was like, this is fundamentally a problem that almost every bank has. No bank wanted to solve it. In fact, I'll tell you, one of the ideas was, hey, we can figure out fraud before it's actually occurring. Why don't we go do that? Oh, well, it turns out almost every bank and most of the financial institutions are taking a bet on fraud and betting for it to actually occur. They actually make more money not preventing it, but betting on it. So that was a bad, so you'd find like you don't actually have the customer there. Now, if you were to make something more around that business, you would find like that, which we did. We actually like pivoted and we actually said, hey, why don't we actually take that same type of data and then sell it to Wall Street? It was like, okay, well, that was easy. You could sell that for $8 million. But this is really kind of like a startup, right? You're gonna find that you are kind of burning, and then when you actually get to the point that you've actually built enough, you built the structure enough, because it's business structure that you also have to build, right? You have to build the ability for you to sell the contract. You have to build the ability for them to feel legally secure, for them to write the check every single month. At that point, you'll begin to see that things begin to pick up quite a bit, and you begin to like usually kick up really fast. Okay, kind of rounding this out, some of these books that I have found fairly useful. One was the Mom Test, which I gave you. Another one, which is a really great one, the Startup Handbook. This one will go through like all the different forms of like how to form a company, whether or not it be a LLC, C Corp. It will also go through. It has really great experience on there, because they'll literally tell you like at the different phases of founding a company, like what to expect and what you'll typically see, like what funding looks like, what are actually investors thinking about. Like for example, early stage companies is a really wide definition. So your earliest stage companies are, I have a great idea. There are people that invest in a really great idea. You'll find that there's a lot of investors who say that they're early stage and that they invest in really great ideas, but they really invest in when your really great idea is actually more around month 14 or month 15 here. They're like, is your idea actually working? So anyways, the Startup Handbook, it goes into there. Sprint is another great book. I'm sure most people, this is a pretty popular book. Sprint is, but this is basically a methodology for when you want to create an idea, like how you actually prove it and dismiss it and actually go through that iteration process within days, not months, not years, right? So it's a really great thing. It actually has you create like a little thing with Post-it notes. You'll figure out like this is what the foundation of the idea is, then you go begin to test it against strengths and weaknesses with the capabilities. You'll find that by following this methodology, you can find like, for example, those things that you would find also in the Mom Test. Like, what if I wanted to go sell Gen AI to compliance people in a bank? Well, the compliance people are not going to be amused because there's like 2 or 3 of them, and the only thing that they do is actually write words. And so Gen AI doing the same thing basically sounds like you're offering to take their job. Traction is another great one. Traction, the great thing about Traction is this is one that really focuses more on the sales side and really focuses on like really how you're going to do it. So anyways, coming down to the end, it says 6:45, it's 44, one more minute. Burn the boats. When the advice really is don't rush, you write it down. Don't take the dopamine hit, right? If you're thinking about it actually being a thing, it is fun for you to make an app and put something out there and test those things out. But then the moment you begin to say, hey, I want to go make it into something, just take a moment, right? Realize that there's a lot underneath there. Now, if you are thinking about like, hey, let's go make the founder jump, yes, go do it. Just make sure that you take that time just to kind of like time out, think about it for a moment, and begin to realize like, what if I didn't get paid? What if these things, right? And like, how would I go figure out like how these things are going to go do? How am I going to get these things? Because, and then probably the most important part is if you do it, burn the boats, commit 100%, don't look back, because in order for you to get your cornered rat superpower, you can't look back, because that's the thing that's going to try to drive you and begin to make you actually make this thing actually pull off. And if you don't pull it off, that's okay, because What is it? I think the stat for Wisconsin is 20%. 20% of your startups don't make it the first year. Even more, also, I'd also say that when you start thinking about like how you're going to also found this, also keep in mind that in venture, 3% of all startups usually get funded. So your biggest strategy is usually like try to build the revenue and build the strength of the revenue piece to actually begin to build your company that way. The nice thing about that is you get to keep all the equity as it grows. So if you ever sell it for like $100 million, you get to keep the $100 million. If you do it the venture way, which unfortunately I am doing, but there are reasons to do it the venture way, which is like in this case, why I'm doing venture this time, is the market is already beginning to realize that that product should already exist, and other companies are beginning to be built similar to it. So I can take 2 or 3 more years to do it the more disciplined way, but by that time there will be no market. So venture capital in this case make more sense to try to actually accelerate and try to get ahead of that market so that it actually exists.
So leader versus leg.
Yes, leader leg. Yep.
How did you prove out the link to revenue for venture capital to be interested?
Each one of them has a different thesis. So that's a really good question. Like, so your early, so I'll just give you my opinion as like a thing. So your early stage, they'll bet an idea or they'll bet on a team or they'll bet on both. Okay, so if you have a really great team, you have a really great idea, you'll find that they'll bet on this. Now, I'm going to tell you, now if you go to the middle and you're now like past that and you're now having to build it, you're now in what's called kind of like the pre-seed stage, where you're now taking that idea and you're trying to prove that there's a product market fit. Now, product market fit is fundamentally, if I get product market fit, that means people will now buy it, okay? So that goes directly to your question, which is how long before they'll actually begin to go, before they go into it, right? So they're going to be looking for some sort of continuous, like you're adding customers every so often, and you'll create KPIs that begin to sell that story, okay? You can tackle this in myriad ways, right? You can tackle it from every day I add a new customer, and the cost of customer acquisition is this much, and this is the cost of goods, right? That's one way to go do it. Another way can be I can prove engagement, right? That the people that I'm keeping this constrained to a certain amount of point, but I can prove that people have fundamentally shifted the way that they work to only use this tool. So again, it comes down to the thesis of what those venture capital are. There's different venture capital has different theses, right? One in Milwaukee, their thesis is women owned and in the Great Lakes region. So looking at this room, none of us are going to get invested. But that's okay. We got many more. I hope I answered your question.
So how do you, okay, so like forward thinking, planning down the road, 3, 5, 7 years. I was with a company that took on venture that like sold their debt to a different owner. Like, are you in your contracts blocking that down so that can't occur? So you can't be shopped without your permission?
Oh, yes. So like right of first refusal, the what is it? Call it first call. There are things that you should build. Again, it's a great question because you can build those into your provisions inside your company. So like a right of first refusal, for example, is, let's say that we went into, like we got bought down to a certain percentage, right? And the owners get diluted down to a certain percentage. And then so now one person says, hey, let's go sell the company, right? Let's go do an exit. So what you do is you typically will put these defensive provisions or clauses inside your actual bylaws and your incorporation documents to basically say, look, if this happens, this is the actual things that actually have to occur in order for that to be approved. It's almost as simple as, without legally going legalese on this, it's almost as simple as like the original founders actually have to agree. Otherwise, you can't sell the company.
Could you talk a little bit more about the mom test and as we're trying to understand if there's a market for a product and what's a key differentiator in understanding that?
That's a lot of questions, Chris.
Sorry, it's a two-part question.
The mom test, talk more about the mom test?
Or about how to understand what people are saying throughout the, as byproduct of the mom test.
Yes. Okay, so in the mom test, when you read this, he actually will walk you through what an approach to get around the mom test. So the best way I can summarize it is you never tell someone what your idea is about when you're asking them what your idea is. So if you say, hey, by the way, this is what it is, right? Everyone will go, hey, this is a great idea, and this is what it's going to be, and this is how whatchamacallit. Instead, your conversation actually starts from the bottom. So remember how I said that one sales guy that I had that we eventually got rid of, where I was like, why didn't you just ask like these basic questions? Like, why are you looking for this? What problem do you have to solve? How would you want to solve it? Like, this is beginning to get mom test right here. Like you're not telling the people what you're going to solve or how you're going to solve it. You're instead asking them, what is your problem? How are you going to do it? Now, if you ever watch anyone who's really good at sales, what is they have the famous thing called like sell me a pen, right? So if we were to do the sell me the pen exercise, do you think that I would come over to you and tell you like, this is the greatest pen ever. It has blue ink. It writes so nice, right? No, I might say, hey, by the way, I might go take all the pens out of the room, and then I might say, if you sign this, I'll give you $100. Anybody want to buy a pen? So the mom test is fundamentally about making sure that you answer questions. Now, one key thing about the mom test, which is good, is you can clearly see it once you start actually clearing it. So you will before, if you do it the way of like, hey, this is my great idea, you'll notice that people, they will give you ideas. They will slowly poke you to try to push you in the right way where they think is the right idea. If you take it the other way and all of a sudden you've actually learned what it is and you actually understood product market fit, you can literally go to the same people and they'll be like, oh my God, I love this idea. Can I go buy it right now? Like it'll be that dramatic. I had, when I originally had the first idea for Voyager, I got the mom answers all the time. When I flipped it one day and I said, hey, what about the problem? One of the people that had been there for a long time just said, I love it so much. Can I tell my manager about it? Because I think we should be buying this. Another person was like, I didn't have the heart to tell you that the other idea was a stinker, but this one actually works.
So developer productivity is going way up, and if you want to ship out an idea, and let's say it's some type of SaaS service, you're going to want to have that thing registered and have a business account and have every server bill paid on that brand new company card before you even get a single paid customer. Because I'm saying like iteration is so fast now that if I want to ship a new idea, it's very like we're talking $5 a month. I get a new user, but at that point I need to have everything established first, and it should just be a separate entity with a separate server bill, and that server bill paid that company credit card?
For B2B, definitely yes. B2C, you could probably iterate a little bit to see whether or not the idea just fails in the market first, and then has like a sudden upshift on there.
Because I'm just saying, like, you make a non-zero amount of money at all, then you need to have it all in order.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. You make a lot of jokes like how your American Express is used a lot, like I have. So, yeah,
Do you have benefits with American Express?
no. They're timely on asking for their money.
You have to pay it every month?
Have you ever tried making a business entity in Wyoming?
No, I did it in Wisconsin, and I found out that everybody does it in Delaware. So now, and by the way, here's something that you should probably also know. If you do it in Delaware, remember, if you're going to sell inside Wisconsin, make sure to register with Department of Revenue. It's only $100.
So what are the disadvantages? Because I just set up something last week in Wisconsin. The tire tax, but like you could transfer out the corp if you needed to.
You can move the corp to Delaware. You can, but fundamentally they would probably restate your certificate.
So it's too late.
Yeah. So now the disadvantages vary, right? So they'll make they might let's say you go create the Delaware C Corp, right? And then they'll say like, how did you get rid of the Wisconsin one? Because we want to make sure that there's no confusion on like what the property's owned where. So
Yeah, I moved one from Illinois to Wisconsin, and that was a mess.
yeah, Illinois. You know what I'm saying?
Do you care about address privacy at all in registering? Do you ever register under a registered agent?
They do. They can do it underneath a registered agent. So there's several companies. So you can like, for example, I think one's called Legal Inc. Like legalinc.com. Like they can act as your registered agent. So yeah, I thought about that as well. So now that I'm on the other side, I'm really happy. Like now everything gets registered to an actual business in a whole other town that's 10 miles away.
Right, and then that really matters when the physical mailing address, it's not a PO box matters, right?
Right. Yeah. The PO box is usually your first way to get around it, but you'll find, if I remember right, Delaware does require you to actually have a physical address, not a PO box. So you could get it mostly disguised with the PO box, except on your certificate of incorporation.
Any other questions?
So I've been a technical trainer most of my life, teaching tech, and last year I just decided I think I'm done with it, and I've been working on like just human well-being, just like really curious about it. So I've been building things and playing with AI a lot, and I was trying to apply the long test stuff that you guys were talking about to what I'm building, which will be a company that trains people in how to, you know, keep human as you do with more and more AI. So when you're saying long test, I'm trying to get to the real information rather than getting like, oh, this is a great idea. Right? So, like for example, I could tell you what I'm doing. Or I could potentially ask you, have you ever been overwhelmed by AI usage in your work in recent times? So that'll give me more relevant information. Is that what the long test is like?
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah, but the book is cheap, by the way. So and it does work you through the process and example questions. But you're right on it, right? Like, have you ever been overwhelmed, and then like what overwhelms you, or just go down that route, right? It's almost like so in order for you to usually pitch to any person, you have to have a well-articulated problem and a well-articulated solution, right? So I put it as problem, an approach, a solution, and then an action, right? Like, what are you going to do about it, right? So with mom test, you're staying solution and playing around with approach.
And people lie to you. They'll lie to your face because they don't want to hurt you. So they lie with good intentions, but they will lie. And the unfortunate part of that is you're trying to solve a problem. And understanding and digging into that, like, how much is this problem worth to you? That's something that people will tell you that it's worth money, but until they actually vote with their wallet, it's worth nothing.
I think the other thing to say is use case, right? Like, if you're already a business owner and you know you like need a tool, like you can test that use case and then roll it out to yourself. And you're literally your best marketer because you're using your own product.
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
You think I'm kidding? You're gonna get a survey later on tonight that's gonna be from Prism Scope, my company. So, other questions? Or you guys are all just hungry and eyeing up the pizza? I see where you guys are going.
Alright.
So let's give it up. Come on. Thank you, Aaron. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And all right, let's grab some pizzas here.